What is she doing? Just melt already. Oh my God. You think I don't notice? Look again.
At my graduation party, I watched my stepmom slip powder into my champagne glass. I know how that sounds. Like I'm about to tell you some wild crime documentary moment where the music goes dum-dum-de-you-you-wum. But this wasn't a dark alley or some shady back room. This was my backyard, the same one where I learned to ride a bike. It's the same one my dad used to grill burgers in every summer until the smoke alarms inside went off and we'd all laugh about it. Balloons were tied to the fence, gold and white, my school colors. A banner flapped in the breeze saying, "Congrats, grad." And my aunt had already posted 17 stories of me holding my cap, like I was auditioning for a toothpaste commercial. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was proud. My dad's eyes were glossy the way they get when he tries to pretend he isn't a softie. Friends from college were buzzing around the speakers, soaking up the moment because that's what you're supposed to do when you graduate, right? You survived the finals, the stress, the ramen noodle years. And now you're stepping into adult life with a piece of paper that cost more than a car. And in the middle of all that joy, I saw her dot my stepmom Claire, moving the way she always did, smooth. Practiced. Like she was born to be watched. She had on this cream dress that made her look like she belonged in a magazine spread titled, "Elegant Women Who Totally Have Their Life Together." She hugged my dad, kissed my cheek, laughed a little too loud at my cousin's jokes. Then she drifted toward the drink table. She didn't look suspicious. She didn't scan the yard like a cartoon villain. She just did it as casually as someone adding sugar to coffee. A quick tilt of her wrist, a soft flick of something white from her little clutch, and a gentle swirl into my champagne flute, the one with my name taped to it in glitter. Maybe nobody else noticed because nobody was looking. But I was. And in that split second, something in me clicked. Not panic, not confusion. Something colder, something clearer. A silent choice that changed everything. Because this wasn't the first time. Claire had played sweet on the outside and poisonous underneath. Not even close. So let's rewind. Let's go back before the champagne. Before the graduation cap, before I learned that love in a family can come with a price tag and sometimes a hidden agenda. Welcome, story lovers. From where are you watching? Drop your city name in the comments so we can see how far our story travel. I wasn't born into chaos. Not the dramatic kind, at least. My earliest memories are simple ones. Warm summer nights, the smell of my mom's hair when she hugged me after work. My dad humming off key while he fixed things around the house. We were what people call regular. Not rich, not struggling in a way that made headlines, but steady. My parents worked hard. My mom was the kind of woman who could stretch a grocery budget like it was elastic. My dad was the kind of man who didn't say much but always showed up. That combo made our home feel safe. Until it didn't. The first crack came when I was around 11. I didn't even understand what was happening at first. Mom got tired a lot. Not the normal tired. This was the kind where she'd sit down in the middle of folding laundry. Hands on her knees like gravity had doubled. We thought it was stress. Work had been rough. She was helping Grandma too. She was carrying everything, like women often do, and maybe her body was just protesting. Then came doctor visits. The hush-hush conversations behind closed doors. The way Dad tried to smile too hard. Why, when he told me everything was fine, everything was not fine. Cancer doesn't arrive with fireworks. It's sneaky. It slides into the house quietly and starts rearranging your whole life. Our family calendar went from soccer games and school concerts to chemo days and oncology appointments. My mom lost her hair, then her appetite, then her spark. But the part that hurt the most was how she tried to protect me from it. She'd still ask about my homework. Still clap when I showed her a decent grade. Still say things like, "You're going to do something big, baby girl? Promise me." Promised. The day she died, the world didn't stop for anyone. The sun still came up. The neighbors still watered their lawns. I remember thinking that was rude. Like, how dare the planet keep spinning when mine had just shattered? Dad and I did that grief dance together for a while. We stumbled through it, leaned on each other, tried to hold the house upright. He'd make dinner and burn the edges because he wasn't used to cooking. I'd quietly start doing more chores than any kid should because it felt like the only way to help. And then, because life loves a plot twist, my dad met Claire. I was 14 the first time I saw her. She looked like the kind of woman who doesn't sweat when she's nervous. She was polite, pretty, and perfectly put together all the time. Her nails were always done, her hair always glossy, her smile always in the right place. When she shook my hand, she called me sweetheart like she'd been practicing it in the mirror. I tried. I really did. I wanted Dad to be happy. I knew he was lonely. I'd seen him fall asleep on the couch holding old photos. I'd heard him cry in the shower when he thought I was asleep. So when he asked me if it was okay that he was dating, I said yes. But my yes was a child's yes. A hopeful yes. A yes that assumed adult happiness meant safety for both of us. Claire moved in within a year. At first, it was almost too nice. She'd bring me little things, new notebooks, fancy scented lotions, a dress for school pictures. She'd say it was because she wanted us to be close. But every gift came with invisible strings. If I didn't gush enough, I was ungrateful. If I said I missed my mom, I was holding the family back. If I did anything that wasn't aligned with her version of what a perfect daughter should be, her sweetness froze over like a lake in winter. It was subtle. That's the part people don't understand. Emotional control doesn't start with shouting. It starts as small corrections. A comment about my posture. A suggestion that I should eat less, laugh softer, talk more politely. A reminder that Dad was finally moving on and I shouldn't keep dragging him into the past. Dad didn't see it. Or maybe he couldn't afford to. He wanted peace so badly that he accepted the illusion of it. He'd say things like, "She means well," or "She's just trying to help." And I'd nod because what else was I supposed to do? You don't want to be the teen who destroys her widowed father's new chance at love. So I shut up. I got good at disappearing inside my own home. And while I disappeared, I also grew up fast. Because if there's one thing grief teaches you, it's that tomorrow isn't guaranteed and you may as well chase what matters. School became my refuge. My mom's promise turned into a quiet fire in my chest. I wasn't going to waste her belief in me. I studied like my life depended on it because, in a way, it did. I joined clubs. I took AP classes. I wrote essays at midnight while the rest of the house slept. I learned to be self-sufficient because nobody else was going to fight for my dreams the way I would. But Claire hated the attention that came with my success. When teachers praised me, she shrugged. When I got awards, she said I was getting a big head. When I got accepted into a good college, she smiled. But her eyes had that flatness I recognized, like she was applauding for a rival. The tension in the house turned into a constant low hum. Not loud enough for Dad to notice, but always there in the background. Like a radio station you can't quite tune out. Money didn't help. After Mom died, Dad had basically been holding everything together with duct tape and prayer. We weren't broke, but we weren't comfortable either. And college was always this looming monster on the horizon. I got scholarships, worked part-time, and cut corners everywhere I could. I learned to say no to things teenagers usually say yes to because I had a bigger picture to protect. Claire would say she supported me. She'd talk about how proud she was to tell people I was her girl. But behind closed doors, she'd casually bring up how expensive college is and how some kids are unrealistic about their future. She'd tell Dad that maybe I should consider a local community college instead of a university out of state. She'd say it in that calm voice that sounded reasonable. But I heard the sharp edges underneath. That was the pattern with her. She didn't want me to fail loudly. She wanted me to shrink quietly, but I didn't. I left for college anyway, carrying 2 suitcases, a scholarship packet, and enough stubbornness to power a small city. I thought distance would make things easier. I thought I could just focus on my life and let the Claire's problems stay back home, like old furniture you don't want but can't throw away. Turns out, you can't outrun someone who's determined to rewrite your story. College was supposed to be my clean slate, my new chapter. The time where I could be myself without constantly negotiating around someone else's moods. And for a while, I loved the campus hum, the feeling of being surrounded by people who were all trying to become something. I loved learning things that made my brain light up. I loved the quiet pride of proving to myself that I belonged there. I was that student who sat in the front row, took too many notes, and asked questions even when my voice shook a little. I wasn't a genius, but I was relentless. I worked hard because I'd seen what happens when life rips your safety net away early. Every semester I'd call Dad and tell him about my grades. He'd puff up like a proud peacock, even through the phone. Claire would jump on the line sometimes too, layering her voice with sweetness, making sure I knew she was rooting for me. But then came the bills. Even with scholarships, there were costs I couldn't avoid. Books, fees, dorm living. The little stuff that adds up until you're staring at a number that feels bigger than your whole life. Dad would send what he could. I worked any job I could fit around class. I lived on coffee and peanut butter sandwiches like it was a gourmet diet. Still, I got behind in my second year. One unexpected lab fee, one laptop that died at the worst time. And suddenly I was panicking in the library at midnight, trying to figure out how to stay enrolled. That's when Claire inserted herself. She called me, voice soft, full of concern. She said she'd been talking to Dad and wanted to help. She told me not to worry. That family takes care of family. She said she could transfer some money toward my tuition. No problem, just needed me to send her the payment portal details. You know that feeling when something sounds too good to be true, but you're exhausted enough to accept it anyway? That was me. I wanted to believe she meant it. I wanted to believe the years of tension had mellowed into something kinder. So I sent the information. She paid. At least, that's what I believed. A week later, I got an email from the university saying my balance was still outstanding. Not reduced. Not partially paid. Still a full, heavy mountain of money. I called the financial office, heart hammering. They checked again. No payment. No pending transfer, nothing. I called Claire. She didn't answer. I called Dad. He sounded confused, said Claire told him she'd taken care of it. He said maybe it was just a processing delay. Processing delay my behind. 2 more weeks passed. Now I had a hold on my account. I couldn't register for next term. I couldn't access certain resources. All my careful planning was wobbling. I called Claire again. She finally answered, sounding almost offended that I'd bothered her. She said she'd tried to pay, but the website was acting up. She said she'd handle it soon. She laughed lightly and said college kids worry too much. These tiny dismissals were familiar. They were her signature, but I couldn't let it slide anymore. Not with my entire future hanging on a maybe. So I did something I'd never done before. I asked for proof. I asked for a receipt, a confirmation email, anything. Silence, then a sharp, clipped breath on the line. Like, how dare I question her generosity? She told me I was being disrespectful. She said I should trust her. She reminded me how stressed Dad was and that I shouldn't put more pressure on him. And there it was. The old control move disguised as care. I hung up shaking. Part rage, part fear. The kind of emotional cocktail that makes you want to scream and cry and also write a strongly worded email to the universe. I didn't want to drag Dad into it, but I had to tell him. So I did, as calmly as I could. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that changed the temperature of my whole body. He said Claire had been saying I asked for money all the time, that I'd become entitled, that I didn't appreciate what she and Dad sacrificed. That hit like a slap. Because I hadn't asked all the time. I'd asked when I absolutely had no other option. And I'd always thanked him. Always. I was the queen of guilt. I'd apologize for needing help even when I shouldn't have had to. Somehow Claire had turned my struggle into a narrative where I was the villain. And Dad, my dad, the man who raised me, was starting to believe it. I wanted to come home and fight. But I couldn't afford a bus ticket, let alone the emotional fallout. Plus, finals were around the corner. The irony of life was hilarious in the most cruel way. So I did what I always did. I went quiet and got strategic. I met with a student aid counselor. I appealed for emergency funding. I picked up extra shifts. I sold my old phone for cash. I did everything possible to fix the mess without relying on anyone who could yank the ground out under me again. I stayed enrolled. But something in me had shifted. I wasn't just working toward graduation anymore. I was working toward independence from Claire's shadow. Over the next 2 years, the pattern got worse. She'd tell Dad I wasn't calling enough. She'd tell him I was pulling away from family. She'd say I was getting too big for my roots. Meanwhile, I was juggling internships, classes, and jobs just to keep my head above water. Every time I visited home on breaks, she'd make little comments in front of relatives about my weight, my clothes, my new college attitude. People would laugh awkwardly because they didn't know what to do. I'd smile through it because I was tired of being painted as dramatic. Dad stayed mostly silent. Sometimes he'd nudge her gently, but most of the time he'd let it slide. He was exhausted. He wanted a calm house. He didn't know that calm built on someone else's suffering isn't calm at all. Then came my final year. I landed a huge opportunity, a competitive fellowship tied to my major. It wasn't just money, it was prestige, networking, the kind of thing that opens doors later. I worked for months on the application. Essays, interviews, letters. I poured everything into it. And I got it. When I called Dad to tell him, I waited for his usual proud explosion. He sounded happy, but distracted. Claire got on the phone. Her voice was sugary again, but there was something else tucked in it. She said congratulations, then drifted into a long talk about how some people get opportunities because they play the system. She joked that I must have charmed the committee because of my sad story. My stomach tightened. She wasn't joking at all. Later that week, I found out from my cousin that Claire had been telling extended family that I only got the fellowship because I'd used my dead mom card. That phrase. It's one thing to feel like your grief is a burden. It's another thing to hear someone weaponize it like gossip. I didn't confront her. Not directly. It would have turned into a loop of denial and blame. I'd done that dance before, and I was done losing energy to it. Instead, I did something smarter. I started collecting evidence. I saved texts. I wrote down dates of conversations. I kept emails. I quietly asked the aid office for proof of every payment made in my name. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning protection. Because if she'd twist things once, she'd twist them again, and next time I needed to be ready. Still, I never expected the moment of truth to come at my graduation party. But life has a sense of timing that's almost petty. And so we arrived back in the backyard, balloons, smiles, champagne. My degree was real now. My future was right there in my hands. I had a job lined up. I had options. I had the kind of momentum Claire could not stop anymore. And she knew it. That's why she did what she did. She wasn't trying to kill me. Not in some soap opera way. She was trying to humiliate me, dull me, make the night about something else, ruin my shine without getting her hands dirty. Powder in a glass isn't always poison. Sometimes it's just a plan to make you stumble. And I had about one heartbeat to decide what I was going to do about it. When I saw the powder hit the champagne, my first instinct was disbelief. Like maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe it was sugar or salt or some kind of fancy party garnish I'd never heard of. But Claire wasn't holding a lemon wedge. She was holding a tiny vial. And I knew her. That calm breeze through my chest wasn't fear anymore. It was something else. Something like the moment a puzzle finally clicks into place. I walked over to the drink table like I belonged there. Like I wasn't boiling inside. I picked up my glass and held it in the sunlight. The bubbles looked normal. The powder had melted fast, leaving only a faint cloudy swirl near the bottom. Claire turned slightly, watching me like a cat watching a bird. Just waiting. So I smiled. Not a shaky smile, a clean one. The kind of smile that says, I see the whole game. Then I set the glass down. I picked up a different one, mine, same tape, same glitter name tag, but untouched. I swapped them casually, like I was just making room or grabbing the colder drink. She froze. Not a big dramatic freeze. Just a millisecond pause. But a millisecond can tell you everything if you're paying attention. I carried the untouched glass to Dad. I hugged him. I let him talk about how proud he was. I let relatives gush. I let friends clink my new glass in a toast. And while all that happened, Claire kept watching me, waiting for me to sip, waiting for me to sway, waiting for me to be the messy distraction that made her feel bigger. I didn't give it to her. That was my first silent choice. But the breaking point wasn't just about refusing the drink. It was about refusing the story she'd been writing for years. Because as the afternoon rolled into evening, the party shifted from toasts to that softer, late-night glow where people get sentimental. My dad asked to say a few words. Everyone gathered near the patio, phones raised. He talked about my mom, how she'd be proud, how hard I'd worked. His voice cracked. Mine did too. Then he thanked Claire. He thanked her for helping raise me and supporting the family. And Claire ate that moment up like dessert. She dabbed her eyes, did that small, humble smile, and leaned into the applause like she deserved it. Something in me snapped. Not violently, not loudly, but cleanly. This was the moment where I could keep swallowing it, or I could set the record straight before it calcified into history. So when Dad finished, I stepped forward. I didn't grab a mic. We didn't have one. I just stood where people could see me. And I told the truth. I said I was grateful for my father, for my mother's memory, for my friends, for every teacher who believed in me, for every job that taught me how to survive. Then I said something I hadn't planned to say until I felt the words leaving me. I said that my journey hadn't been easy, that losing Mom had been a wound I carried into every exam and every late-night shift, that I had learned to hold myself up when life got heavy. And then I said that sometimes the hardest part of growing up wasn't the outside world. It was the quiet battles in your own house. The way someone can smile in public and make you feel small in private. The way support can be promised and then taken away. People got still. You could feel it. That shift when a party stops being a party for a second and becomes a room waiting. I didn't name Claire yet. I didn't need to. Her face was tightening because she knew where I was going. I said that I had to learn that love doesn't sabotage you. Family doesn't compete with your future. And anyone who tries to dim your light because they're afraid of your shine doesn't get to take credit for your glow. Finally, I looked directly at her. I said that I had watched someone put something into my drink that afternoon, and that I had chosen not to drink it. I said that I didn't know what it was, and I wasn't going to start guessing in front of everyone. I said the point wasn't the powder. The point was that I was done being quietly hurt. You could hear a spoon drop. A dog barked somewhere across the street like even the neighborhood wanted to know what was happening. Claire's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted to Dad, then to the relatives, then back to me. That performance smile was gone. What was left was raw panic. Dad looked stunned, like the floor had moved. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't screaming. My voice wasn't even shaking much. That's what shocked people the most. I was calm. I said I wouldn't ruin the night, that I was still celebrating, but that I wanted it understood, once and for all, that my success belonged to the people who genuinely helped me. And to me? Then I raised my untouched glass. I toasted to survival, to truth, to becoming so steady inside that nobody else can knock you over. And I drank. Not to be dramatic, to be symbolic, because this glass hadn't been touched by her plan. Claire didn't speak the rest of the night. She wandered around like a ghost at her own party. Some relatives avoided her. Some watched her with narrowed eyes. A few pulled me aside later to say they'd sensed something off for years but didn't know what. Dad didn't yell. Not there. He was too embarrassed, too confused, too heartbroken. But I saw something important in his face. For the first time, he wasn't looking through her version of reality. He was looking at me. Really seeing me? Dear audience, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to give it a like. It really helps. If you've ever dropped a truth bomb into a family gathering, you know the aftermath doesn't come with neat credits and a theme song. It's messy. It's awkward. It echoes. That night, after everyone left, I sat on my old bed staring at the ceiling like I was 14 again. Only this time, I didn't feel small. I felt tired, emotionally wrung out, but also light. Like I'd set down a backpack I didn't realize I'd been wearing for years. Dad knocked softly and came in. He looked older than he had that afternoon. We didn't have some cinematic screaming match. That's not who my dad is. He's not dramatic. His pain shows up as silence. He asked me if it was true. I said yes. He asked what was in the vial. I said I didn't know. I said I'd rather not speculate. I said what mattered was that she'd done it. He sat down heavy, like a man finally meeting a truth he'd avoided. He asked how long things had been bad between us, and that's when I gave him everything. Not in a furious rant. In a timeline. A calm, clear timeline. I told him about the tuition lie, about the gossip, about the little digs that didn't look like digs unless you lived with them, about the constant push to shrink, about how I stayed quiet because I didn't want to hurt him. He put his head in his hands. I could hear his breathing change the way it does when someone is swallowing regret so hard they might choke. He apologized. Not in a sorry you feel that way kind of apology, a real one. One that didn't defend her. One that didn't excuse himself. One that said, "I've failed to protect you. I'm sorry." I cried then, not because I wanted him to hurt, but because hearing him say that finally gave my childhood somewhere to rest. The next morning, Dad confronted Claire. I wasn't in the room. I didn't need to be. I'd already done my part. But I heard her voice through the walls, sharp, defensive, climbing that ladder of denial she always used. I heard Dad's voice too, lower, steadier than I'd heard in years. The air felt different, like a door had opened that wouldn't close again. By afternoon, Claire was gone. She packed a suitcase, called a friend, left without speaking to me. There was no tearful goodbye. No, let's fix this. No apology. Because the truth is, people who thrive on control aren't built for accountability. Dad and I spent the next few days in a strange quiet. Not uncomfortable, just new. Like we were learning how to be a family without someone constantly managing the temperature. I left for my job 2 weeks later. The first months of my new life were busy and disorienting in the best way. I learned how to be a professional, how to build routines that weren't about survival, how to be a young woman in the world without someone quietly trying to dull her edges. Dad and I talked more than we ever had. Not just about the drama, about Mom, about life, about his guilt, about my dreams. We weren't perfect, but we were honest. Claire tried to reach out twice. The first time was a text that read like a press release, vague sadness. A hint that she was the victim, a suggestion that I'd embarrassed her unnecessarily. I didn't reply. The second time, months later, came through a relative. She wanted to clear the air. She wanted to talk about how misunderstandings happen. She wanted to say she couldn't believe I'd accused her. I still didn't reply. Because redemption isn't always about letting someone back in. Sometimes redemption is letting yourself finally have peace. Dad filed for divorce that year. It was hard for him. I don't pretend otherwise. He'd already buried one wife. He hated the idea of another family collapse. But he told me something that made my heart crack open in a good way. He said he'd rather live alone in truth than partnered in illusions. We started rebuilding our relationship like two people clearing old rubble. We went through Mom's things together. We visited her grave on her birthday. We talked about the years after she died, the ones we both lost in different ways. He started therapy. Actual therapy. Not the I'm fine kind of therapy men of his generation often do. He said he needed to understand why he missed what he missed. Why he'd handed over too much trust to someone who didn't deserve it. Watching him grow felt like watching a tree straighten after a storm. Meanwhile, I grew too. There was a confidence that came with no longer negotiating for air. I threw myself into my work. I made friends who felt like siblings. I started volunteering with a scholarship program for kids from hard backgrounds because I knew what it meant to crave a lifeline. I didn't become bitter. That's what surprised me the most. I thought exposing Claire would harden me. Instead, it clarified me. It taught me to trust my instincts, to stop apologizing for noticing things, to stop gaslighting myself just because someone else was charming. 2 years later, I got promoted. 3 years later, I bought my first place. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. My walls, my peace. Dad came to visit and sat on my couch looking proud in a way that was quieter than a party toast, but bigger than any applause. We talked about Claire once briefly. I told him I didn't hate her. I told him I hoped she found whatever healing she clearly needed. But I also told him I didn't want her in my life. He nodded. No argument. Because by then, he finally understood that loving me meant respecting the boundaries that protected me. The redemption in this story isn't that I became rich overnight or that Claire got punished on some dramatic stage. The redemption is that I walked into adulthood without carrying her poison. The redemption is that my dad and I found our way back to each other. The redemption is that I graduated not just from school, but from silence. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories every week. You know what's strange? For a long time, I thought strength meant enduring quietly. I thought being mature meant swallowing hurt because making noise might make things worse. I thought love required patience even when patience turned into self-erasure. But that backyard moment taught me something my mom probably hoped I'd learn sooner. Strength isn't just surviving what hurts you. Strength is naming it. Not to ruin the party, not to light a fire just to watch it burn, but to stop living inside a version of reality that someone else keeps editing. People like Claire depend on your silence. They depend on the fact that you'll doubt yourself, that you'll think, maybe I'm overreacting, maybe I'm imagining it, maybe I should keep the peace. But peace built on your shrinking isn't peace. It's a hostage situation with nicer curtains. The quiet choice I made that day wasn't just switching glasses. It was choosing myself in front of everyone who'd watched me become smaller for years. And here's the twist that still makes me shake my head sometimes. A year after the divorce, Dad found something in a folder of old paperwork. A financial statement he'd never looked at closely because, in his mind, Claire handled all that. She hadn't. The powder in my champagne wasn't the first time she'd tried to sabotage someone. She'd been taking money from their joint account for years. Small amounts at first, then bigger. When Dad did the math with his therapist and the bank, it added up to nearly the amount he'd spent helping me through college. She hadn't just tried to dim my future. She'd literally been stealing from the family while blaming me for costing too much. When Dad told me, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt confirmed, like my instincts had been holding receipts long before paper did. He reported it. The bank handled the rest. Life moved on. But every time I think about that scene, balloons, smiles, a glass on a sunny table, I think about how many people are standing at their own drink tables right now, sensing something off, feeling small, debating whether to stay quiet. So let me ask you this. What silent choice are you making in your own life? Are you shrinking to keep a false peace? Are you swallowing truth because you're afraid of being labeled difficult? Or are you ready, maybe not loudly, maybe not perfectly, but honestly, to choose yourself? Because sometimes the biggest redemption isn't revenge. It's freedom. It's walking away with your light intact. It's realizing that your future doesn't need permission from people who fear it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories and new videos.